We have mothers from England. We have staff members, we have community members. Welcome everybody, it's so nice to have you. Hello Aurora, nice to meet you.
Hello.
Oh, headphones. Where are you calling in from today, Aurora?
She's my friend, so she's also joining from Uzbekistan.
It really is a community event. I love that. That's lovely. Oh, my friend's joining from Ecuador. Yes. This is just so heartwarming at this point. As everybody's coming in, just a reminder, you'll feel free to put your videos on. Carlo has his dog sat next to him. I have my mother sat next to me. So you're all welcome. It's a community event for everybody.
A pillow.
Emily has a pillow to hug. Wonderful. I'll wait a few more minutes to get people in and get settled as well. Reminder, if you do not have paper and a pen, preferably coloured pens. Am I right, Emily?
Colored pens, pencils, crayons, just anything with color if you have it.
Okay, all the things with colour. Bring them. Bring white paper with you. We're all going to be doing the drawing out process together. And feel free to put your videos on as well. Okay, I'll just give it a few more minutes. Is that all right, Emily, before we begin?
Yeah, this is your show.
It's everybody's show today. We're here for ourselves and for each other and the community. It's wonderful to have you all.
True.
I feel like there always needs to be intro music, like something calming, like a spa.
That's true. That would be good. Have a QS World Merit theme song that you play.
Yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it?
We have a theme song?
No, but we can create one.
Yeah, we should. We definitely should.
Have some very talented people in this community, no doubt, who I'm sure maybe you could have a challenge like that. Say, okay, write a theme song for QS World Merit.
We definitely can. So welcome everybody who's coming in new. Feel free to put your video on. We're just smiling faces, but there's no pressure if not. The recording, sorry, we will be recording, let me put my teeth in. We will be recording this session and it will be available on YouTube for anyone that has missed it or you feel like this might be useful for them. And Emily will be telling you more about ChangeLight throughout this process as well and how to get involved with what she's doing. So I'm just going to give it one more minute and then I'll give my warm introduction to Emily, who is joining us today. And do remember, white paper, coloured pens if you have them available. And something warm or a nice glass of water. Okay. I will welcome everybody in now while we're here. For anyone that comes in a little bit late, I'm sure Shaq knows you can give them a message or just welcome them in as well. Thank you everybody for joining. It is a pleasure to welcome you. I am the interim CEO of QS World Merit. My name is Beth Eden. I'm currently in the UK for meetings for our charity, but I do reside on the Vancouver Island on the west coast of Canada in Victoria, BC. And it's a pleasure to have you all. We created this event because we were very triggered by the recent and horrific invasion into the Ukraine. However, we do recognise that there is oppression and violence all over the world happening in many different countries and communities. And this is impacting our community, our homes, our friends and our family. And really, the one thing that we can do is to take care of ourselves and to process through crises and conflict together. And so we put our heads together at QS World Merit to think, how can we give back to the community of young people around the world? And we thought there was no better way than to introduce Emily Eldridge to a session to do the drawing out process with us, to really help process what is going on in the world and taking it inwards. So Emily is actually the founder of ChangeLight and the creator of the ChangeLight system. She'll definitely be explaining a little bit more about this. So Emily guides leaders and change makers like yourself listening in through an inner working process that accelerates their power to change the world. That's really what we want to do, right? Her discoveries and techniques have been hailed as genius, exhilarating, brilliant, miracle working. And I actually can attest to incredible work that she has done with me. I have known probably Emily for almost 5 years, and she has been significant in my journey as a young change maker and a young CEO. So thank you, Emily. She's presented at TEDx, the British Parliament, the United Nations, and she teaches leaders and change makers how to do their inner work for good. So I hope this session really helps you and aligns with Emily's mission to accelerate the healing of humanity and our planet. And without further ado, Emily, it's over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone, and all of you with your lovely faces, those I can see, and maybe I'll see the rest of you at some point. I am so happy to be here. I was so honored to be invited by QS World Merit to talk to you all about, the emotional struggles that a lot of us have in response to things that happen in the world. Obviously, as Beth mentioned with Ukraine, that's been very forefront in the news, and at least in the United States, at least it has been very much here. It's a very scary situation, but at the same time, sadly, there are scary situations all the time, all over the world. And some of us here may have been personally touched by those. And so I think it's really important, no matter whether our personal situation or traumas or tragedies or crises or conflicts that are impacting us, whether they're publicly known or not, they can really have an emotional impact on us. And it's so, so important that as we are, going through our days and that we process our feelings, because those feelings can really catch up with us and they can end up impacting how well we perform and how well we show up and, how we're feeling even physically. And so I just wanted to share a bit about how I tend to approach emotions and how I teach other people to approach their own emotions, what I find works. And then at the end to teach you a short 3-step technique that I developed actually when I was in my deepest, darkest time of my life. And really I didn't have any tools that were really working for me at the time for processing those deep, intense emotions. So I'm going to share that with you, just the first part of a longer process that I developed called the drawing out process. As Beth mentioned, I have shared this in a lot of different places. I've shared this at a lot of World Merit events. I am sort of, I think, affectionately known by some as Merit Mom, which is super sweet because at those big events, it's usually very intense and very, lots of activities and lots of learning. And that we found brings up a lot of emotional stuff as well, that even as we're talking about fixing problems in the world, it really can trigger our own wounds, our own defenses. And so whenever I have spoken, I've always been so struck by how many young change makers will, after I speak and share my work, they come to me and they say, oh my gosh, I'm really needing this work and I didn't realize how much I've been struggling or how much pressure I put on myself or how much I criticized myself. And so what the technique I'll share with you can also help with that as well, to really recognize those deeper parts that even when we don't have things like, Russia invading Ukraine or other crises and conflicts, that are forefront in the world, that even in our daily lives and even in dealing with our sort of underlying emotions and our own triggers and wounds, this can help that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Here you go. Oops, that was not right. There it is, right there. So how to deal with hard emotions in times of crisis and conflict. So first of all, I want us to think about, and I want this to be somewhat interactive. I think that actually, before I get started, Beth, I think we agreed to have everybody type in the chat where you're zooming in from. So if you don't mind putting that in the chat, that would be fantastic. Just because it's so exciting to see people from all over the place. I just love it. Excellent. Ooh, yay, UK with her mom. Excellent. Wonderful. Look at this. We're all over the place. And by the way, I'm in New York City right now, a very gray, rainy day here in New York City. I am originally from Texas, sort of Texas and Massachusetts, sort of the south, south in the southern United States and the Northeast. So I've got a bit of a, cultural, I guess, balance or imbalance there. I don't know. But anyway, yeah. So excellent. Thanks for sharing where you're from. So I just want to acknowledge, oops, what just happened there? There we go. I just want us to look at that when we see situations in the world, or again, even if we witness them in our immediate environment, we often have emotional reactions, even if those events don't immediately impact us directly, right? So maybe you don't know anyone in Ukraine or Russia. Maybe you don't know anyone who's been through, who's going through that particular disaster or tragedy. I'm going to share with you some of the reasons why we tend to have our reactions. But first, I just want to take a moment to honor the fact that we do have these emotional reactions. And, here, I don't know, is this going away? Sorry about that. Here's just a short list, frankly, of some of the emotional reactions that we can have. So feeling sad, afraid, anxious, feeling very impatient and kind of testy, and reactive, irritated, angry. We can feel overwhelmed, maybe a sense of hopelessness or helplessness or despair. Sometimes it can be more of even a physical feeling. And it's really important, I think, that we honor that as well, because oftentimes when we're feeling emotions, they don't always come to us as, oh, I'm feeling sad. Sometimes it's a heaviness. Sometimes it's feeling blocked. Sometimes it's having trouble sleeping. Sometimes it's feeling tired and worn. And the list goes on. And so it's really important for us, and again, even independently of whether or not we're going through some kind of crisis or we're witnessing something from afar, it's really important to really tune into when we're having those emotional reactions, but also those physical reactions. It's amazing to me how many people, or shouldn't be amazing to me, but I mean, a lot of people have shared with me that ever since this recent event with, Russia invading Ukraine, that they've had trouble sleeping, that they really haven't slept well, that they have kind of a constant anxiety, that they're putting themselves very much in the positions of Ukrainians and imagining, what if that happened to me? And there may be some of you for whom that has happened, where you have been invaded or you've been violated in some way, physically or in terms of your space or your country or your community. And so it has that impact on us when we see that happen to other people. And so it's just really important to pause and to really notice how you're feeling. So I just want to take a moment, if it's okay, and just notice just briefly, like, what are some of the feelings you've been having lately? Maybe more than usual. Maybe you have been having trouble sleeping more than usual. Maybe you've been feeling more impatient or irritated, or overly reactive or anxious. So go ahead and in the chat, if you would, just write some words that describe how you're feeling or how you've been feeling, if you would. Yeah, tired and heavy. Yeah. I know some people who've been feeling more reactive and not even totally aware of why they're so reactive, but it's just, they just find themselves being, more reactive, more emotionally reactive and triggered, easily triggered. So yes, anxious for the increasing uncertainty, overwhelmed, anxious. Yeah, a lot of anxiety. A lot of fear. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. That's excellent. And you'll find that there's a lot of power in sharing how you're feeling when it comes to processing emotions. So there are a couple of main reasons I found why we emotionally react. Again, there may be certain circumstances in the world that are not directly impacting us, but we're seeing it on TV, or we're hearing stories, or we're seeing social media posts, or we're seeing images and videos. And even though we may be safe in our own homes and you're well taken care of and there's nothing immediately threatening our well-being, it can definitely have a really intense, we can definitely have really intense emotional reactions. And I find there are two basic reasons for this. And one is that we're naturally empathetic. And, I don't know if you know the term empath, but empath tends to describe someone who can like feel how other people feel. So there are those of us that, and I'm deeply empathic, so I can often feel what's going on with someone else, that I'm working with, or I just can identify those emotions that they're feeling. But whether or not you're someone who you would say is an empath, you can still have this empathic reaction. And empathy is that where you're literally kind of feeling what they feel and identifying with how they're feeling. And the reality is that as human beings, this is just the way we are. I mean, this is part of how we connect with one another, is through empathy, is through that emotional connection that we forge with each other. And we can forge emotional connections through really happy, wonderful, joyful experiences, but we can also form them through sad and scary and really intense experiences. In fact, you may have been through experiences in your life that were really intense, really trying, and you really had to struggle through something with other people. And you may feel that bond with them that's just inextricable. I'm thinking for myself, I'm thinking of, I was a first responder for 9/11 at Ground Zero, and I was living here in New York, and I ran down to help. And obviously it was an empathic reaction on my part in wanting to serve and support. But even after that, the relationships that I forged with my fellow volunteers are absolutely lifelong because of what we went through together and some of those intense, tearful nights that we spent and some of the traumas that we felt. And actually, speaking of 9/11, or even of my experience with 9/11, it's interesting because over the years, I've gone through various waves of processing that. Now, I didn't watch it fall myself. I just saw a video of it, but then I was down there and I was around the pit and I was with the firefighters and I was helping people process their emotions and, run supplies and things. But I'll just tell you, just as what I thought was kind of an interesting footnote to my experience is that over the years, I noticed that I would sort of avoid anything related to 9/11. And finally, after a number of years, I thought, you know what, maybe I need to pay attention to what's going on here. Maybe I was traumatized more than I realized. And then it wasn't until like 17 years later, I mean, just a few years ago, when I was watching something and I was watching a story, someone tell a story, and it was not about 9/11. It was about some young boy and some situation he was in. And then all of a sudden, 9/11 just dropped into the story. And she just said, and then the towers fell. And it hit me just like, and I sat there in the audience watching this and I started, tears streaming down my face. And so as I started to process that, what I realized was, no, I hadn't lost anyone personally. No, I hadn't been hurt. I mean, I did have some health issues as a result, but generally my experience at Ground Zero, weirdly enough, was generally positive. However, at the same time, what I realized was coming up was this deep grief that I'd carried around just simply being in a space where some of my fellow human beings had, murdered, killed, caused people, my other fellow human beings to die. And so it was almost just that on that primal level of pain and grief and sadness that humans, that our fellow people do this to each other. So I want to just point that out as that was even like this primal empathy that I felt. And it took a long time for me to even recognize it because I hadn't fully turned towards it and faced it and honored those feelings. So that's one reason. We're just naturally empathetic beings. Another big reason, though, and the story that I just told is kind of actually a good example of this, is that oftentimes when we witness things that are happening, even if they're happening to other people, they can trigger our own defenses and our own wounds. They can trigger our own life experiences, our own traumas and tragedies that we've been through. And so in that moment, it's not just that we're watching what's happening and we're feeling sad for the people who are being attacked or the people who are dying or the people who are suffering and struggling, but it's also triggering something deeper for us that is relevant in some way or another, that is connected to something that we've experienced in the past. And so that's why I feel it's really important that as we look at our emotional reactions to Ukraine or Syria or all these other situations in the world where our fellow human beings are being hurt, that we recognize how, in addition to our own level of human empathy with one another, we also have our own things that we've been through that can get triggered. And it's really, really, really important to honor those feelings as well. And that's what we're going to do with this next technique that I'm going to share with you in a moment. So, what is it that our emotions need? Because they do have needs. And it's, you know, it's amazing to me. Let me just put it this way, that it's amazing to me how we can so consciously and subconsciously dismiss our own feelings. And there are all kinds of reasons why we do this. Oftentimes because we think, well, I don't have time to sit down and cry about this because I'm trying to survive and I need to get these things done. And we can sometimes think of our emotions as being annoying or frustration, or they're in the way. But the reality is our emotions are real, and our emotions are there for a reason. And so what is it that helps us process our emotions? What is it that our emotions need to help them move through so that we can regain clarity and centeredness and calmness again, so that we can really move forward with clarity and calmness and with a sense of centeredness, as opposed to what I described before, right? Reactivity, impatience, anger, you know, feeling so tired and heavy all of the time. And the truth is, our emotions, it's really simple. They just want to be noticed. They just want to be heard. They just want to be seen. They also want to be felt. It's like, look at the word feelings. Emotions want to be felt. That's the whole point. We're meant to feel our feelings, to feel our emotions. And this may sound so totally basic, but as I said, it's amazing how subconsciously we can dismiss our own feelings. We cannot feel our own feelings. And that's oftentimes when I talk about defenses in wounds, that's where those defenses will come in. And in the work that I teach, and we're not going to get into this today unless we have time and people are curious, but I teach that we actually have 3 types of defenses and wounds. We have 3 types of inner struggles that exist to protect us from pain, because we've been through that pain before. And these are parts that are either feeling that pain or trying to keep us from feeling that pain. So, but the reality is, emotions just want to be noticed. They want to be felt, and they want to be validated. Validated is really important here, because it's one thing to feel our feelings, but it's another thing to let our feelings know and let ourselves know that it's okay to feel everything we feel. We have a right to how we feel. You have a right to everything you feel. And again, to some people that may seem so basic, but if you look at your life, and this was definitely a theme in mine, how often our feelings are dismissed by other people, how often we're taught that no, we don't have a right to feel that way, or we shouldn't feel that way, or we should just move on, or we should try to suppress that part of us because we're afraid that someone's going to criticize us for it. So again, there are all kinds of unconscious mechanisms that we use that actually prevent us from really giving our emotions and our feelings what it is that they need, so that we can have what we need. Because as we notice and we feel and we validate our own feelings, we're really noticing and feeling and validating ourselves. That's not to say that how you feel is who you are, right? So it's not saying, well, I'm angry right now, therefore I'm an angry person. It's not about that. But when we honor at that part of us that's angry, we can help it calm down. because we're giving it what it needs. It just wants to be heard and seen and validated, not dismissed, not told that I shouldn't be angry and you shouldn't be angry, but really just calming. And another reason why it's important to talk about this too is because when it comes to emotions, it's amazing how often we can have a very left-brained approach to what is a right-brained issue. And we're going to talk about this a little bit in a minute when I teach you this technique. So oftentimes, so in general terms, your left brain is where you have like reason and logic and sort of your thinking happens, if you will, and very practically minded. The right brain is more like your subconscious, your emotions, your feelings, creativity, and all these other more sort of fluid things. Whereas the left brain is sort of like the more rigid and categorizing, whereas the right brain is a little more fluid, if you will. And so the thing is, though, sometimes the way we're taught to deal with our emotions is in a more left-brained kind of way. So I have to fix how I feel, or I have to analyze it, or I have to figure it out. I can't even tell you how much less of that oftentimes that can actually have a counter, that can have the opposite effect and cause us to keep struggling with how we're feeling, as opposed to doing what I say here about noticing and feeling and validating. Because sometimes what happens, we end up analyzing, so we're trying to figure it out and we're struggling with that part of, so you're taking that left brain approach to the right brain. But really what I'm going to teach you is all about having a more right-brained approach to what's going on in your right brain with your emotions and with your subconscious. So with that said, I'm going to teach you the first 3 steps of this process that I created called the drawing out process. Before I continue, I just want to give the opportunity, if anybody has any questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat so that at some point I can address them. But if you have any questions about what I shared, I would love to hear them. So at this point, we are going to go ahead and pull out your paper and your pen and your crayons or whatever else you have to work with, because we're going to do a little bit of processing some of the emotions that you've described, or really just some of the emotions that you're feeling in general. Okay, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for putting the questions in the chat. So let me just start before I get into the technique. So in terms of my own, here, I'm going to stop sharing because I want to talk directly to you. Hello, everyone. In terms of the work that I do and that I created, and I see Beth and for mom. Hello, Beth and for mom. In terms of the work that I created, it really came out of my own struggle. So just want to give you a little background as to this technique that I'm about to teach you. Is that I went through a lot of emotional struggles for a very long time. And back in 2009, they all came to a head. And mind you, I had tried for many years to deal with my emotions. So I was, my mother's a psychotherapist for one thing, so I got a lot of free therapy. And actually some of you have met my mother at World Merit, US World Merit events. But so I got a lot of free therapy from her, and I was trying meditation and yoga and breathing and all kinds of different techniques to really process how I was feeling. But the feelings were so intense and so deep that it's like I would feel a momentary relief, but then they would just come right back again. And so in 2009 is when everything in my own life fell apart. The relationship I thought was going to be the one, and the business we were starting, and the, visions that we had, and the mission that we were fulfilling, all seemed like it was finally happening. But then everything came crashing down. And when everything else came crashing down, so did I. And I fell into a deep, dark night of the soul. And that's actually, it was the most painful experience of my life. So you talk about hard emotions. It was like self-loathing and, wanting to end my own life, and just deep pain and grief and hating myself. And so the point is, though, it was the most painful experience of my life. But at the same time, it proved to be one of the greatest gifts I could possibly have been given, because it forced me to face what was really going on inside of me. I couldn't get away from it. It was all right there, all of that darkness, all of that pain, all of those voices of criticism and wounding and anger and rage and all of this stuff that I'd been trying not to deal with for all those years. But obviously I had not successfully dealt with it, or I hadn't been successful in not dealing with them, because the thing with emotions is that they're very persistent. They are very stubborn, right? If you ever try to suppress an emotion or forget how you're feeling, they just come popping right back up. And actually, that's something I talk about in my work when I talk about the physics of emotion, is that really the reason why that happens is, let's say you have an emotion popping up and you try to push it down, it's just going to keep popping up again, because it's basically following Newton's third law of physics about energy. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So that's the problem with that, is that when we do that with how we're feeling, or even how we're thinking, if you try to push away thoughts, it's just going to come right back. And sometimes more so than before, because it's just following the physics of emotion. It's nothing personal. It's not that there's anything wrong with you. It's just that that emotion needs to be honored and felt and processed in a healthy way. And so what happened was, I couldn't get away from my own pain. And it was really excruciating. And my mother at the time too, she was really trying to help me, but it just wasn't helping. And so what happened was, I ended up, a few things happened, and I ended up really facing my own inner demons. And I faced my first, what I call it, my first monster, and ended up drawing out that monster, and finding that as I drew out that monster that was telling me that I was worthless and I was nothing, and I was a failure, and I never done anything good with my life, and I was never going to amount to anything. It was a really, really vicious part of me, that actually, once I did these first 3 steps I'm going to teach you, that I felt so much better, and I felt so much more peaceful, and I felt so much calmer. And that part of me actually disappeared, and just, and the reason why was because rather than fighting against it, I turned towards it, honored it, and noticed it, and validated it, and just let it know, okay, I know you're there. And that's what it wanted. That's what it needed. And once it got that, then it felt like it could release. Now, the technique I'm going to teach you, not everything releases immediately automatically, but it can very, very, very much help with calming those emotions inside, so that the more you do this technique and draw out, the more those emotions can calm, and therefore the clearer you can feel, and the more your inner wisdom can come shining through to guide you in whatever it is you feel called to do going forward. And if it is something related to Ukraine or some other tragic situation in the world, or it's just in your daily life, we're allowing space for that wisdom to come through and guide you. So with that said, I hope you have your pens and your paper and your crayons and all kinds of good stuff. And I'll go back to sharing my screen. There it is. So here's the first thing to do. It's so ridiculously simple, let me tell you. And by the way, I should tell you that I did these 3 steps for months after I had that first loathing monster coming up inside of me, and I just felt so much better. So I'm hoping that this helps you as well. And these are some of the techniques that I've taught to some of the people in your community and in years past. So the first step is to simply notice. So obviously the fact that you're on this call right now means that you have been noticing how you're feeling. And whether it's because you're feeling heavy, or because you're feeling anxious, as a lot of people described, or you're having trouble sleeping, or you're more irritated and impatient than usual, the first step is to simply notice how you're feeling. So just pause for a moment. And if you want, you can close your eyes. And for now, actually, if you want to turn off your cameras, if you feel more comfortable doing that, you can do that. But just pause for a moment, take a deep breath. And just notice what's coming up for you. Notice how you're feeling. Notice the thoughts that are coming into your mind. Notice what you're feeling in your body. So the whole point is just noticing what's there inside of you. Not struggling with it, like we talked about, not analyzing it. You don't have to understand why it's there, but just allow it to be there and to be present with it. So as you're noticing what's there inside of you, when you're ready, go ahead and grab, your pen, or pencil, and paper, and start writing down what you're noticing. And this is the next step, to name or just to write. So if you're noticing anxiety, write anxiety. If you're noticing fear, write fear. If you're noticing a belief or a thought that's coming to your mind, a thought like, I feel so helpless, or I don't know what to do, or I'm so angry at someone or something. So just take your time and trust whatever comes. Just pour it out on the page, whatever comes. By the way, this naming step, to name it, is also, you're actually bringing in your left brain into this process of dealing with your emotions, because and doing that actually helps your left brain calm down as well, to help its thinking calm. You're doing great. So we'll do another couple of minutes of this noticing and naming or writing, and then we'll go to the third step. And as always, trust whatever you're feeling, trust whatever comes, because there is wisdom in how you're feeling. Underneath that pain, there is wisdom. And it's okay for you to allow it to express itself. The feelings may hurt, but they can't hurt you. If anything, feelings hurt us when we allow them to stay inside and fester and get worse. So this is a way to just let it pour out on the page. And so the third step that I want to teach you is draw. So what do I mean by draw? As you are noticing how you're feeling and noticing the thoughts and noticing the emotions, notice what you're seeing as well. Notice what you're seeing in your mind's eye. Notice the images that your subconscious is bringing up for you. Maybe it's memories. Maybe it's specific incidents in your life. Maybe it's particular images that are haunting you. Or maybe it's parts of you, a part of you or parts of you that are feeling those feelings that you've just been writing down, or that are saying those things. And you can ask yourself that. If you're seeing emotions, you're writing down emotions or writing down things that you're hearing, ask yourself, who is feeling that way? What part of me is feeling that way? What part of me is saying those things? Because what happens is, as we go through life, we have experiences that cause parts of us to form that then carry those wounds, as I described before, or that create defenses that are protective and defensive mechanisms to try to prevent us from being in those situations and feeling that pain again. And so what we may think is just sort of an amorphous emotion inside of us may actually be a part of us or parts of us. And it could be parts of us that are in struggle with each other. So like an inner critic, and maybe a child that we have inside that's in pain. Maybe what's coming up for you is just a big black hole. Maybe it's a wall. Maybe you're actually having trouble accessing the feelings. Maybe it's a mean, angry face. Whatever it is, there are no wrong answers to any of this. And if there's anything I've learned in 13 years of doing this work, it's that your wisdom guides this. You have this incredible wisdom inside of you that knows exactly what to bring up and when. Any parts of you that are needing to feel noticed and validated and healed in this moment right now. So just trust. And as you're drawing, just pour it all out, everything that's coming out that you're seeing. Even if you're like, I don't understand this, this is weird, this is crazy, or you think it's something that's bad or wrong about you, I promise you it is not. There is nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing wrong with how you feel. You feel the way you feel for a reason. And just one final thing I want to add, and then we'll come back to, showing our faces, if that's okay again, and sharing in these last few minutes, if anyone feels called to share what they drew, is also, you might ask yourself, when was the first time you remember feeling this way? When did this first show up? Because sometimes asking that question can give some good information about how long that wound has been there, or even to recognize that your emotional reaction that you're having in this moment right now to what's happening in the world, what you're seeing on the news or social media, that actually it really can be triggering, as I talked about before, it can be triggering something that's happened to you in the past. And so not only are you having that empathetic human reaction, but you're also having that trigger reaction because you have been through situations where you have felt powerless, attacked, violated, hurt, scared, out of control, etc., etc. Okay? So this is just a moment to really honor that as well. That there are layers to how we feel, and that it's okay to feel everything you feel. All right, excellent. Seeing some faces here. So take another deep breath if you would, and just, because some deep stuff might have come up and we really want to honor that. Some deep stuff. Excuse me. All right, let's see everyone. So yeah, as you come back, I'd love to hear if anyone would like to share what they noticed, what came up for them, and even if you're like, I don't understand this, this is crazy, this is weird, that's okay. I'd just love to know if anyone has anything they'd like to share, or even if you want to show your drawing, you're welcome to. I did not draw this time, but I can tell you, I have drawn lots of scary things. I've drawn lots of crazy things, like, oh my gosh, lots of monsters, lots of walls. I've drawn like puddles for when I felt like procrastinating and I didn't feel like doing anything. So yeah, this is something that you can just do in your journal, and anytime you're feeling anything, just dump it out and allow the feelings to process. Something else I didn't mention, by the way, is that when we're using that right brain, the way the left brain, I should say, tends to communicate is with words. Letters and words and numbers, things like that. But the reason why drawing how we feel is so incredibly powerful is because your subconscious and your emotions tend to communicate in images. So when you actually allow your emotions to communicate in their own language, we can get a lot more information. So when I work with clients and they draw stuff out, and a lot of times they'll say like, I don't know why I drew this, or, wow, I never thought this is what would come through, or, oh, I thought I processed this already. But it's like the subconscious knows what to bring forward. And there's all kinds of rich information in a drawing, even if it's a stick figure, by the way. I forgot to mention that. This is not about art, like stick figures work. But by allowing the mind to process and to share through images and not just words, we're actually getting it straight from that subconscious, as opposed to if you ask your left brain if you're thinking about how you feel, then you're asking your left brain to process what's going on in your right brain. Does that make sense? So it's really about pulling it straight from the deeper part of you so that you can get even faster healing that way and relief. So does anyone want to share anything, or do you want to write it in the chat? Anything that came up for you?
All right.
Go ahead.
Actually, now what I'm feeling is like sleepiness and tiredness somehow, but calmness from inside. Yeah. So if I show my drawing, I'm feeling in this way.
Oh, wow.
It's like a bit heaviness on my body and on my brain. Yeah.
Yeah. So by drawing it out, are you saying that you feel heavier but calmer, you said? Like you still feel kind of heavy?
From inside, yeah, I'm feeling calm, but my body maybe feeling tired and sleepy.
Yeah. Well, and the truth is your body may need more rest. I mean, that's the reality, is that carrying heavy emotions, it's hard on our bodies. It's very hard on our bodies. And so if you're feeling especially tired, it could be because your body's like, I need to take a break. I need to rest right now. So it's important to honor that. Thank you for sharing, Aurora. Thank you. Yeah, and I would offer also, you might notice what's underneath the heaviness, because while it's a physical reaction you're having, if you sort of tune into it even more, if you feel called to, I don't want you to do anything that you're not comfortable doing, but if you tune into it even more, you might start to notice an actual emotion. For example, grief. Which is pretty heavy emotion. I'm not saying that that's what it is, but it could be grief, or it could be like despair or powerlessness, different feelings like that. So yeah, and then see what comes up, and you can draw those out. So this is a continual process of just like drawing out, getting this stuff out of you. So it's outside of you. It's not in you anymore. So you're not carrying it around so much. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anyone else want to share or have anything to share, or questions or anything? Nope.
I can share a little bit if no one else
Yes.
is going to. And I just want to explain as well, this video will not be posted openly on YouTube. So if you did want to share something personally, we're not going to post it to the world. So don't worry about that. I'm sorry for saying otherwise. One of the things I drew was just this spiral, this like feeling that there was a literal spiral, like going around on top of my head. So many deep things and places to put my attention in. And there's a sense of responsibility that because I'm not feeling conflict right now, that I need to help alleviate that in others. And that just brings my brain into a place where I'm just like constantly spinning. And someone put that, actually, I think someone put dizzy as their feeling. So I found that interesting.
So it's a dizzy feeling. Is it that your mind feels like it won't stop thinking, or it's just constantly like, is it like, how does it make you feel that your mind, that you've got the spiral?
Yeah, like that you're kind of in a whirlwind and you can't keep up. There's like no way of fully being able to brace yourself. And that within that, it's kind of in your mind, like that spiral is very mental. It's like a mental spiral. You're just constantly going. And there's no feeling of rest and stop. Yeah.
Does it make it hard to prioritize on what needs to be focused on right now? Like, have you noticed that?
Yes,
yeah,
definitely. I think that's something that a lot of people feel, right? When they're in times when they're overworked, or when times of conflict arise and there isn't a single solution. There is nothing that I can do that will solve this issue right now. So there's constant ideas of how I can help or where I should put my attention, but it's not definitive. There's not one spot I can go to. So that brings anxiety, right? It brings this spiral feeling in the mind that there's never a point of settling down. So I think someone's raised their hand that might.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, I do want to say something. Thank you, because I do want to say something about the spinning mind, and that sometimes what happens is that you, and this may be the case for you or not, but I found that a lot of times that what can happen is when fear or some kind of emotion comes up, the left brain, that thinking mind, will go into overdrive because it senses that there's an emotion and it wants to fix it. It wants to go, okay, how do I fix this? And so it does what it knows how to do, which is to think, you know, and plan and strategize and all of that, which it's trying to help. I mean, there's no part of you that's bad. All parts of us are doing their best to take care of us, whatever ways they know. And so sometimes what happens, and you can say whether or not this resonates, but sometimes what happens is that left brain will then be like, well, I got to figure this out. You know, we've got to fix this, and I want to make, you know, her feel better. And so it tries to do what it knows how to do. But what ultimately ends up happening is that, yeah, you feel dizzy, you feel overwhelmed. It's hard to know what to focus on. And then it creates even more anxiety because you're like, you know, how do I stay focused and calm? Sometimes what I find that helps is to actually say to my mind, I'll say, okay, I can tell that you're trying really hard to figure this out for me, or I can tell that you're working really, really hard right now. And I can, you can say, and I can tell it's because you know that I'm having a hard time, but it's okay. Like, say this to the mind. It's okay. You don't have to work so hard. It's okay. Because really the guidance, at least in my experience, that is the most effective is what comes from that wisdom. It's not from the overthinking mind. It's from actually your clarity and your wisdom that you already have inside. So by helping your mind calm down and go, oh, okay, I don't have to work so hard. There's more space for that guidance and that wisdom to come through. So I hope that helps. Maybe you can give that a try.
It's permission to rest as well.
Yes. Yes, exactly. You're giving your mind permission to rest. Exactly. Wonderful. Thank you. All right, Shiraz, did you have your hand up?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I forgot to actually introduce myself in the very beginning. My name is Shiraz. It's kind of red wine. It's easier to remember that way. Well, in the very beginning, I was questioning myself if I really belong to this session, if I may call that. But right now, I'm really happy because I'm learning lots of techniques and very unusual tools actually to express your emotions and feel more relieved and also I would say less conflicted with yourself. Because as I have mentioned in the very beginning, I feel extremely relaxed and chilled, which scares me sometimes because I misunderstand it with, or I confuse it with indifference maybe, or laziness. but then again, I remind myself laziness might be something which would actually make me feel panicked when the deadlines approach. But even with deadlines approaching, I'm feeling very, I would say, like less responsible, if I may say that. I don't know. It's super scary, chilled attitude towards anything, which scares me sometimes as well. And when we were doing the session, practical session with drawing, I actually drew bubbles. If you can see that, I don't know, like
Oh yeah,
it's
yeah.
I'm not, and you can also notice I'm not a good artist, right? My right brain is not very well, I would say, doing its job. Well, anyways, I was actually seeing the bubbles. Some of them were just popping up, and some of them were just like flying away, far away. I don't know how can I relate to this, but still it feels very childlike. I think, yeah. But again, like thanks a lot to the co-host who is doing a great job for um, doing this voluntarily, first of all, which I liked a lot. Thanks a lot.
You're most welcome, and thank you for sharing. It's interesting how you talked about feeling calm and at the same time that the panic, and or sort of calm and lazy that you said.
Yeah.
And I would be curious if that sort of what you're feeling as laziness or like chill may actually be trying to protect you from panic. Does that make sense? Like sometimes that can be a protective mechanism, you know, so because it's like a part of us doesn't want us to go into panic. And so it kind of goes, no, everything's cool. We're fine. I don't know if that resonates for you, if it feels like, you know, it might be a part of you that's protecting you from going to the other extreme. But it's so great that you're tuned into, you're aware of that you're like, well, I am feeling chill, but wait a minute, what's really going on here, right?
Yeah,
and so that's how it's interesting. We have all these different layers of emotions that as you start to tune in and you start to really pay attention, it's like it's, if I love it when I'll work with a client and they'll say, oh my gosh, I have so much rage. And they just have this overwhelming rage. And then I'll say, okay, so let's tune into the rage. And it feels out of their control. It feels huge. I'll say, okay, let's just tune into the rage and see what comes up. And so many times they'll actually say, you know what? It's actually kind of calm inside of there, you know, or like this part of me that's been so enraged, when I actually listened to it and it actually calmed down because it knew that it was going to be heard and it had a lot of wisdom to share. And so that's where it's really, I find it fun. I know it's overwhelming and it's intimidating and it hurts sometimes, but really there's such an amazing world we have inside. And when the more you draw out these parts of you and you start to notice like what's underneath, it's just, if you meet it all with curiosity is a really important thing. Just be curious. Remember how I said before, like, don't judge or struggle or, you know, any of those feelings. Just be curious about them and see what's really going on, because how it appears on the surface may not actually be what's going on under the surface. And when we were doing the technique, I said, there's a lot of wisdom in your pain as well. A lot of times we fight our pain because we think that it's trying to hurt us or there's something wrong with us for feeling this way. But really there's so much wisdom when we start to listen and tune in and recognize that really there's some really fabulous guidance. So for example, I will say that with like the rage, like that's what I call an inner defender usually. And so that's one of the 3 types that I teach in my system. And an inner defender, they're like the ones who have like this awesome wisdom that's all about like boundary setting and what's right for you. And so what's cool is when you like tune into something like a feeling like that, is you can end up getting all this wisdom and guidance that you're like, I never knew this was inside of me. And it's like, it's all there. It's all there. We just all have to just slow down and pause long enough to tune in and draw it out. Just dump it out. And by the way, art, I should have said this before like 10,000 times. Stick figures are fine. This is not about art. This is purely about just trusting whatever's coming up for you and putting it on paper in images, sounds, words, everything, just really letting it dump out. So thank you.
Yeah,
Well, I see
thanks.
that we're at time now, correct, Beth? I guess we're at time. So I wanted to thank you so much for being so present. I know this isn't always fun talking about feelings and everything, but I'm really, really grateful that you all showed up today and really went there. So thank you so much. And I hope this has been helpful. Thank you, Michaela. I will say that if you do have some lingering feelings, you are welcome to reach out to me personally. I don't want anyone to feel like there's this sort of drop off, like, okay, we did this thing, but I've still got the stuff that I need help with. So I just want you to know that I'm here to support you. And my email address is emily@changelight.world, but I'm also going to share my screen because if it's okay, I just want you to know too, and Beth said that I could share this with you, that also I have an online community and an online course where I teach this full system, where I teach the drawing out process, where you can draw out your struggles, but also draw out your strengths as well, and really get tuned into your truth. It's designed especially for change makers and mission-driven leaders like you. So I just want you to know that is available to you. And also the important thing, and that you can go to changelight.world or community.changelight.world to join there. Very, very deep discount for you all. Just want to let you know that. But anyway, yeah, so changelight.world. And then how important it is when we're talking about dealing with our emotions, how important it is to connect with others. I'll come back to me so I can see my face. How important it is to do what we're doing today, which is connecting with each other and recognizing that you're not alone. That it really is also about, we are on this together, and whatever emotional reactions you're having, you are not the only one, honeys, at all. There are people all over the world feeling the way you feel who've been through similar experiences. And so it's not just, it's about doing that inner work for greater good, as I call it, but it really is also about doing that inner work so that we can more fully connect with each other and heal together, so that by healing ourselves, we can heal humanity and shine our brightest lights. So thank you so much. You all are so wonderful. I just love seeing your beautiful faces, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you everybody for coming. I hope you have a wonderful evening, day ahead, wherever you are in the world. And we'll send a link of this unlisted recording if you'd like to watch it back. Have a great day ahead. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It was great.
You're so
Have a good
welcome.
day. Bye.